Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Blame It on the Stars, where we give you an inside look to what's going on in the universe so you can blame your problems on the stars. It is Jade here.
And it's Kara.
And this week, it's our annual New Year's special, where we reflect on everything that happened during the past year and give you a look ahead to every major moment that will happen next year. In case you missed it, last week, though, we did talk all about the Mars retrograde that's happening. While you're listening to this episode, Mars retrograde carries into next year. We also talked about some of the transits that are happening during the week that this episode comes out, since we knew we'll be talking all about New Year's stuff this week. So if you want to know more about the transits that are happening the week this episode comes out, or you want to know more about Mars retrograde, then definitely check out last week's episode before diving into this one.
And just to give you a heads up, next week we will tell you everything that you need to know about Capricorn season and how it affects you.
And with that being said, let's reflect on the past year. So 2024 was a year where we had quite a few societal changes. We had eclipses, we had retrogrades. But starting off with some of the big societal changes that happened in the astrology, we had Pluto enter Aquarius right when the new year began on January 20th. This happened at 7:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When Pluto entered Aquarius, it started an era all about innovation, technology, and also things like our social dynamics and our friendships. So if you notice that during this past year, there was a shift towards thinking about community and friendships, and you noticed a lot of changes in technology happening, that was because of Pluto entering Aquarius. Pluto did briefly retrograde back into Capricorn for the last time on September 1st, but Pluto re-entered Aquarius November 19th, and it will stay there, making this a transit that continues to impact you for the next several years.
Another big thing that happened this past year is we finished the Jupiter in Taurus cycle. This was a time where we were focused on building stability and our personal values. There also was a major aspect where Jupiter was conjunct Uranus. That happened on April 20th, and that really shook things up and brought about a lot of sudden changes. Taurus energy is known for being very stable, but with the aspect to Uranus, there were a lot of sudden changes and breakthroughs that might have happened for you, and really asked you to find new ways to adapt and build a sense of comfort and safety for yourself.
After Jupiter wrapped up its time in Taurus, Jupiter entered Gemini. This happened on May 25th. And after Jupiter entered Gemini, we began a period of expansion and growth when it comes to things like being adaptable and communicating and learning. So you might have noticed after May 25th in your life that you were more drawn to exploring your curiosity and seeing where it takes you. There might have been more of a focus in your life on intellectual pursuits and learning new things, acquiring new skills. However, Jupiter in Gemini also brought some Jupiter squares to Saturn, one of which still has not happened at the time that this episode comes out. The second Jupiter square Saturn happens on December 24th. But with the first one that happened on August 19th, you might have noticed that there was some tension when it comes between wanting to grow, but also needing discipline. If that was something you experienced in the summer, you might be revisiting that now as we get closer to December 24th. It's also worth noting that the Jupiter square Saturn cycle will come to an end in 2025 when we have its final square in Cancer and Aries, but we will tell you a little bit more about that when we get into the 2025 stuff.
So this year, we finished the eclipse cycle that happens in Libra and Aries. This cycle was focused on finding balance between your independence, your own goals, and the things that you set out to do for yourself, and relationships and how you spend time with others. There also was an eclipse that happened in September that was in Pisces, which is foreshadowing the eclipse cycle of next year. So if you could think back to September and maybe some of the themes that came up for you around the time of that eclipse, you can expect that to continue on in 2025.
And then, of course, every year we do experience a minimum of 3 Mercury retrogrades. That's going to happen every year. This year, the Mercury retrogrades we had were mostly in fire signs. We had a Mercury retrograde in Aries between April 1st and April 25th, which might have caused some challenges when it came to making decisions and asserting yourself. We had a Mercury retrograde that started in Virgo but ended in Leo. This happened between August 5th and August 28th, which could have brought some challenges around organizational skills and self-expression. And currently, we're in the middle of the last Mercury retrograde of the year, which is Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which is great to have a Mercury retrograde around the time of this episode where we're reflecting on the year and thinking about how we want to move forward. But outside of that, this retrograde might affect travel plans and the usual miscommunications and package delays if you're listening to this around the holiday season. But don't worry, the last Mercury retrograde of the year ends December 15th.
And then lastly, there is one more retrograde that is going to bring us into the new year. This is Mars retrograde, which will happen in the sign of Leo starting on December 6th at 6:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We did talk about this retrograde in more detail in last week's episode if you do want to check that out to hear more about the details. But also for now, just know that the retrograde will continue all the way into January of next year when Mars will retrograde back into the sign of Cancer on January 6, 2025.
That is a wrap for 2024. I can say 2025 is a big year. We have a lot of big shifts happening, and I would not be surprised if 2025 feels vastly different than 2024. And we're going to explain why. What are some of these big changes we're going to have? Mostly you'll notice this upcoming year, there are going to be a lot of outer planet movements. Granted, these are outer planet shifts that will move into one sign and then dip back into another. So think of 2025 as a good transition year between the big changes of 2026 and closing out what we finish in 2024. The first shift of the year will be when the North Node enters Pisces on January 29th at 1:50 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The North Node indicates our direction in life and where we're headed. And it also is what sets up our eclipses. So as Kara mentioned earlier, we had a Pisces eclipse. The North Node entering Pisces will foreshadow more Pisces and Virgo eclipses to come. The North Node moving into Pisces will signify a shift towards embracing our intuition and being more compassionate to one another. In your life, you might notice that you are letting go of perfectionism and focusing on being more empathetic and understanding with people. The North Node has quite a lot of aspects that it's going to make. February 22nd, Neptune will be conjunct the North Node, which can be a powerful day for dreaming and manifestation. On April 14th, Saturn will conjunct the North Node, which can be a very strong time for working towards your growth, your destiny, and your purpose as you're combining that disciplined and responsible energy with this very future-focused, life path-focused energy. And then also on May 15th, Jupiter squares the North Node, which can bring some tension as there is this really strong desire to expand, but you might notice that your beliefs might not fully align with the direction you are heading in. So there will need to be a recalibration of your goals with your direction. But that is the North Node in Pisces, something to look out for next year.
And then next year, we also will have Neptune going back and forth between the signs of Aries and Pisces. We will start off the year with Neptune in Pisces, like how we had it this year, but Neptune will enter into the sign of Aries on March 30th, which is going to bring a lot more energy to our goals and the projects that we are working on. It also can bring about a lot of drive and passion for creativity, the arts, and spirituality. Neptune is going to retrograde back into the sign of Pisces on October 22nd, and then it will station direct in Pisces at the end of next year on December 10th.
Speaking of Aries, we start off the year continuing the Saturn in Pisces era, which, if you need a refresher, can be bringing a lot of lessons around emotional maturity, boundaries, and compassion. However, we will have our first taste of Saturn in Aries on May 24th. When Saturn enters Aries, it marks the start of a cycle around leadership, independence, and assertiveness. So you might notice that there's a shift in your life towards building foundations for long-term projects or taking responsibility for your goals, and also addressing impulsiveness with action that is more structured. Saturn does retrograde in Aries on July 13th and then dip back into Pisces on September 1st. And we will finish out 2025 with Saturn in Pisces. Saturn retrograde in particular will end November 27th. So for those of you who have a birthday between February 14th, 1994 and April 7th, 1996, and you have your Saturn in Pisces, you will start to wrap up some of those themes around your Saturn return. But for those of you with a birthday between April 7th, 1996 and June 9th, 1998, this will be the first taste of your Saturn return in Aries.
When it comes to the Jupiter transits of 2025, there is quite a few things that are going on. We start off the year with Jupiter retrograde in Gemini, and then it will station direct on February 4th. Once the retrograde ends, you can expect your ideas and conversations to flow more freely and for there to be more of a focus on learning, growing, and trying out new things. Then Jupiter will enter the sign of Cancer on June 9th. Jupiter is exalted in the sign of Cancer, so you can expect this to be a very positive transit where Jupiter is really able to fully express its very optimistic energy. With Jupiter's very lucky and generous energy combining with Cancer's more empathetic and creative side, you can expect to be more giving and generous to the people around you, and also to be more focused on expressing yourself, creating art, and embracing your artistic side. So while Jupiter is in Cancer, there will be a couple of aspects that we definitely wanted to mention. The first one being Jupiter will be square Saturn. That happens on June 15th, which is going to bring about some tension when it comes to the desire to expand and grow, and also needing to have a solid and stable foundation. There also will be an aspect that happens to Neptune. Jupiter will be square Neptune on June 18th. And this can, again, bring about some like foggy, confusing energy where you are really dreaming big and there might be a need to reel it in and stay grounded so that you can be realistic in your everyday life as you're working to achieve those goals.
And the last of the big outer planet shifts that will happen is with Uranus. We start off the year continuing the Uranus in Taurus energy, which is bringing some changes when it comes to how we think about our comfort zone, but also bringing some focus to things like finances and the environment, as well as our values. However, on July 7th, Uranus will enter Gemini, which can be a big change when it comes to thought leadership, as well as how we gain information. There can be a lot of focus on how we're using certain things like the internet to share information, how we spread information, and how we manage misinformation in your personal life. You might notice that you are more encouraged to be open-minded and flexible. We do have a Uranus retrograde, so Uranus will station retrograde in Gemini on September 6th, but then move back into Taurus on November 7th. So we'll finish out the year with Uranus in Taurus, but have that first taste of Uranus in Gemini from July 7th until November 7th.
So when it comes to the eclipses in 2025, we will have the final eclipse in the Aries and Libra cycle, and also transition into the eclipses that are happening in Virgo and Pisces. The final eclipse that happens in the Libra and Aries cycle is the solar eclipse in Aries, which happens on March 29th. The remainder of the eclipses, as mentioned, are in Virgo and Pisces, which is bringing more of a focus on balancing practicality with your intuition. There will be a lunar eclipse in Virgo on March 4th, a lunar eclipse in Pisces on September 7th, and finally a solar eclipse in Virgo, which happens on September 21st.
Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Well, some will perceive this as bad news. Others will understand that retrogrades are periods of reflection and are opportunities to realign and revisit. We do start off 2025 with Mars retrograde. As we know, Mars stationed retrograde in Leo on December 5th of 2024. Mars retrogrades into Cancer on January 6th. And will station direct in Cancer on February 23rd. So we are in Mars retrograde energy up until February 23rd. When Mars retrograde is in Cancer, it can encourage you to think about how you manage conflict, how you protect yourself, and how you assert your needs. But there can be a challenge when it comes to acting rationally, as emotions might be little stronger than usual. We will have a dedicated episode to Mars retrograde in Cancer, so there will be plenty more details on that shortly, but that is how we're coming into the new year. And outside of Mars retrograde, we also will have a Venus retrograde this year. The Venus retrograde will start in the sign of Aries on March 1st, and then retrograde into Pisces on March 27th, stationing direct in Pisces on April 12th. So Venus retrogrades in general are a period of time where we're reflecting on how we handle our relationships, how we handle our finances, and how we express ourselves creatively. With Venus retrograde in Aries, there might be a focus on independence, assertiveness, and thinking about how your actions aligned with your values and relationships. And then when it shifts into Pisces, the themes will change and you'll be reflecting on how you are making space for compassion and forgiveness when it comes to your relationships, but there can be some challenges around boundaries during that time. Overall, though, Venus retrogrades serve as a period of time to realign with how you want your relationships to be in your life and to get clarity on how you are making decisions, specifically financial ones and creative ones as well. So do not fret. Venus retrogrades are something that we can't avoid.
And speaking of retrogrades, we also will have Mercury retrograde 3 times in 2025. It will be in a mix of fire signs for a majority of the retrograde periods, but there will be moments where the Mercury retrograde will enter into water signs. The first retrograde happens in Aries. It begins on March 15th. It will enter back into the sign of Pisces on March 29th, and then finally end on April 7th. So the whole retrograde goes from March 15th to April 7th. This retrograde is going to be more focused on your communication habits, especially when it comes to being direct while it's in the sign of Aries. Once it shifts into Pisces, there will be more focus on being introspective and intuitive. The second Mercury retrograde will happen in the sign of Leo. That goes from July 18th until August 11th. With Mercury retrograde in Leo, you can expect to be more focused on reflecting on your creative side and also how you express yourself and your identity. The final Mercury retrograde will happen in Sagittarius. It starts on November 9th. It will move into the sign of Scorpio on November 18th and then officially end on November 29th of 2025. This retrograde is more focused on reflecting on your beliefs, your education, and maybe any travel plans. Once the retrograde moves into Scorpio, there will be more of a focus on healing and your inner world.
And that is a wrap for 2025. So, as you can see, quite a mixed bag. Lots of big changes that will happen next year. Even if they're just for a few months, we're getting a taste of what's to come in the upcoming years. While this may have been our New Year's special, we are not quite done discussing what is to come. Next week, we'll be telling you everything that happens during Capricorn season before we take our end of the year break. So if you want to stay in the loop with us and what's to come, make sure wherever you're listening to this podcast, you are subscribed with the notifications turned on so you don't miss when we post next week. But until then, that is all for now, and we'll see you all next Monday. Bye.